still tower over the waterfront. These gray ghosts of the past that once stood as a testament to Buffalo's dominance as the grain capital of the world. Now, these abandoned grain elevators may soon come back to life.
We're starting to fix the elevators themselves now.
Buffalo native Rick Smith is telling Mayor Byron Brown about his vision for an ethanol plant that will use existing grain elevators to store 40 million bushels of corn for production of 110 million gallons a year of the alternative fuel.
It's a perfect fit for Buffalo because we've got all this great infrastructure and we've got all this the rail, the water, the storage. We've got a great opportunity to take advantage of that.
On the 18 acres purchased by Riverite Energy, the corn would find its way into 4 grain elevators capable of storing 10 million bushels at any time. 2 former flour mills dating back as far as the early 1900s may be used as warehouses. 24 separate rail lines enter the property, which sits along 3,000 feet of riverfront where the giant lake freighters used to arrive.
We're so uniquely positioned for this kind of an industry that I think, you know, you get scared because you might be missing something, but I don't think we are.
From atop the giant Lake and Rail elevator built in the late 1920s, Riverite's co-founder Kevin Townsell gives us a rare look at the conveyor system, which he says really hasn't changed much over the years.
Well, this is the top floor. It's called the bin floor of the elevator. And 4 million bushels at a time are stored below us.
The Buffalo Gray Ghosts still hold a certain fascination for people. The grain elevator was invented in 1842 by Buffalo businessman Joseph Dart, whose steam-driven buckets on a belt scooped up grain from the hold of a ship and then dropped it into tall storage bins. Up until then, Irish workers in the old First Ward had unloaded the grain on their backs. The history of the Irish Old First Ward is as colorful as it gets in Buffalo. The community was once filled with taverns whose patrons would literally scoop the grain out of ships and feed the great elevators. The last scoop was in 2003, but the memories of the men who labored together, men including former Buffalo Mayor Jimmy Griffin, are as vivid as the day they started the job.
You had the dust, and the dust was tough. We were talking about you had to wear the mask. You know, it's tough breathing with the mask. You know, put the mask on, and you didn't like to wear it all the time.
Some guys even wore a mask and they put a hole in it and put a cigar in there.
Sometimes you could see good, sometimes you couldn't, depend on the weather too. And there was no heat in the elevators.
And everybody was making money in them days. Of course, you're only making a little bit compared to now, you know. But what the heck, in them days, $100 a week was a good pay.
Yeah.
There were so many elevators, you get laid off for one, you go on another one, you get laid off for that one, you go on another one.
The story of the grain scoopers is told through this video, recorded by documentarian Mark Mayo, who spent 15 years with the men as they labored in the bellies of freighters.
It was so noisy, and they used hand signals to tell one another from one end of the hole to the other what was happening and what needed to be done. But when you saw everybody working in unison, it was like as you were watching a ballet.
Everybody who worked on the waterfront was pretty much related in some fashion, or they knew somebody who was related because everybody was from down here in the neighborhood. A lot of guys, I mean, they went through the Catholic school here, 8th grade, and they went right to work at the grain elevator. So predominantly Irish, and you could trace your lineage back in some place you may have been a 3rd or 4th cousin with somebody who was working alongside of you.
Everybody had to get something to clear the dust. So where else to get it but in a tavern? When we'd go to lunch, we'd go to a gin most of the time, and we used to say to swallow the dust.
Wash the dust down.
Wash the dust down, you know?
We used to stop and have a couple of pops, and we'd sit around and redo the boat, you know, or something like that. And then we started laughing and stayed longer than we should, you know, and you wouldn't get home and your wife would say, where were you? Oh, we had a breakdown.
Yeah, there was a lot of camaraderie, really, and yeah, you couldn't be a phony down here and get away with it. You were found out at a young age if you were a phony. So you may have moved into a different career. But if your choice was to work on the waterfront, you really had to be straightforward with people.
They depended on each other for their lives and their livelihood, and had a historical reason for protecting each other and their profession. Up until 1899, when they went on strike, their lives were not their own. Their pay slips were redeemable only at the boarding house where they lived and the bar where they drank. Both were generally owned by the same boss who controlled them.
It was a way of, in some ways, controlling the waterfront, but it also helped control the political system in Buffalo in terms of you were basically told how you were going to vote, and so when the strike happened, as they went to forming a union, I mean, it gave them the freedom to bargain for themselves.
And that's the life they embraced, and it was hard for them when one by one the elevators shut down and the ships disappeared and the neighborhood began to change. What was lost, they say, can never be regained.
This is the way we put bread on our tables. We gave you our sons, our hearts, and our will. And it's way, hey boy, hand me that shovel. The kinsman's on time for every last run. And it's way, hey boy, hand me that shovel. The scoopers will work till the job's finally done.
With the steel mills basically gone, they were the last of that group of manual laborers that were involved in an industry that helped Buffalo become the city that she was.
The scoopers won't work now the job's finally done.